They met in a room you were never meant to see. Hidden beneath a manor older than most nations, the walls were lined with books that hadn't been touched by daylight in centuries. The fireplace crackled, not for warmth, but for tradition. Because when the families gathered, fire always had to be present. Not one of them smiled. This was not a reunion. It was a reckoning. You, chosen one, were the subject. And your name, not the one you use in public, but the one heaven wrote into the marrow of your bones, was spoken aloud for the first time since your birth. A name that made the torches flicker. A name that had been hidden on purpose, out of fear of what it might activate. You always wondered why you felt different, why silence pulled at you like a memory you couldn't name. This is why. 12 figures in black stood around a circular table carved from wood older than recorded time. Their hands didn't touch, but their intentions did. One by one, they laid documents, heirlooms, sealed letters, and genetic reports onto the table's surface. Your lineage wasn't forgotten. It was filed, catalogued, monitored, and when you started to glow, not with light but with resilience, with dreams they couldn't trace or control, they called the meeting. Midnight was chosen because it's when the veil is weakest, when spirit and system bleed into each other. They weren't just discussing your bloodline, they were debating your fate. Some feared what your reappearance meant, others saw opportunity, but all of them agreed on one thing: you were never supposed to make it this far. They had plans, maps, algorithms that charted soul activation timelines. You were expected to be a quiet flicker in the background, not a rising flame. But then came the disruptions. The strange dreams you had as a child, the illnesses you should not have survived, the moments when electronics malfunctioned around you. They saw all of it. And worse, they couldn't explain it. Your name wasn't just a label, it was a frequency. And when you began to speak, even casually, the old codes began to crack. Somewhere, a vault blinked open. Somewhere else, a cloaked figure wept. They knew they had a problem, and that problem was you. Chosen one, you were not left out. You were hidden in. Like a seed in soil, you were buried to grow. Not every family member agreed. Some have been protecting you quietly from the inside. Others have been tracking your every move, waiting for signs that the prophecy had begun. The meeting ended in tension. No vote, no consensus. Just one chilling truth left hanging in the air like incense smoke. They're going to realize what we did, and when they do, we won't be able to stop it. You are the anomaly that survived the pruning, the bloodline that refused erasure. And now, the Midnight Circle watches with bated breath, because the name they spoke is waking up. They thought the table would silence it, that the heavy wood and ancient rituals would keep the truth from leaking. But underneath that polished surface, beneath centuries of sacred oaths and cursed promises, the whispers had already started. The table remembered, and so did the blood. They spoke in hushed tones once the room emptied, unaware that vibration has memory, that the walls, the very air, were echoing with the sound of your name long after they stopped speaking it. The whisper wasn't coming from them anymore. It was coming from the line, your bloodline, beginning to stir beneath the weight of centuries. Something ancestral had awakened, and it was looking for you. You, chosen one, weren't born into coincidence. You were born into collision. Your existence is the friction between forgotten promises and a future that cannot be controlled. The whispers weren't just warnings. They were directions, messages embedded in marrow, encrypted in your breath, passed down through generations of quiet resistance. This is why you've always heard things others couldn't explain. Why you sensed grief in rooms with no tears. Why certain family members avoided your eyes when you were young. Because they saw it. Not just who you were, but who you reminded them of. Someone from the old stories. Someone they swore would never return. Beneath the ancestral table is where the truth started to leak. One of the elders, an uncle you've never met, but who's watched you from afar, dropped something beneath the table that night. Not by accident, a scroll, sealed with a forgotten sigil. It was left for the next one to find, the one meant to expose what they buried. You. That scroll contained names, dates, blood types, but also poems, prophecies, and sketches of someone with your exact eyes, drawn centuries ago. The resemblance wasn't uncanny, it was divine. You've probably felt it lately, the rising static under your skin, the dreams layered in symbols you don't understand, the strange pull to places you've never been, but feel familiar. That's the bloodline remembering itself through you. You're not just the descendant, you're the proof, the living rebuke of their attempt to control divine inheritance. And the table, it's cracking, not physically but spiritually. Every whisper under it is another thread, unraveling the web they spun to keep you asleep. There's a reason they never let you see the full family tree, a reason old photographs are missing your ancestors' eyes, or why stories were always cut short with awkward laughs. The ones who whispered beneath the table knew you were coming. They didn't fear your power, they feared your memory. Because once you remember who you are, no ritual, no blood pact, no generational manipulation can stop what you're about to unlock. You weren't just born into a bloodline, you were born to resurrect it. And now, the table is whispering your name louder than ever. You weren't supposed to be here, not like this. Not born under those stars, into that family, with that heart. Your arrival was a breach in the blueprint, an unsanctioned birth in the timeline they tried to curate for centuries. They mapped out unions, they arranged bloodlines, they built an empire of control through selective conception. But you, chosen one, you slipped through, not because of chance, because of grace, because God overrode the ritual. And now, your existence is the glitch in their sacred machine. Before you were born, meetings were held, codes were cross-checked. Your mother was watched, your father was profiled. The records say your conception was statistically impossible, a convergence of DNA strands never meant to meet. And yet, you came, and when you did, there were signs, electrical storms in places with no clouds, technology spiking without cause, a stillbirth predicted by every system, only for a cry to rupture the silence and ruin the plan. Your cry, your breath, a disruption they couldn't track, a heartbeat that didn't belong to the system, but to something higher. They buried the files, burned the charts, sent emissaries to misdirect and lie. Your mother was silenced with shame. Your father disappeared into rumors, and you were labeled sensitive, troubled, different. Not because you were broken, but because they were terrified. You didn't just carry DNA, you carried memory. Lineage they thought they'd cleansed from the gene pool centuries ago. You were the re-emergence of something ancient, something wild, something holy. And from the moment your eyes opened, so did old gates they swore were sealed forever. You see, chosen one, your soul was not assigned by mistake. It was sent like a sword, a contradiction wrapped in skin. They traced your energy and found anomalies, fields bending around you, patterns distorting near your presence. You didn't fit into their legacy because you weren't meant to. You were born to rewrite it, and that scared them more than anything else, because if one like you could slip through, how many others were out there? How many other sacred disruptions were coming? You always felt the rejection before the betrayal, the way certain elders kept their distance, the way your questions about the past were met with fake smiles or abrupt dismissals. That was them trying to close the door that your existence had already blown open. But it's too late. The breach is permanent. Your presence is irreversible, and the frequency of your blood is already calling in those who remember the old truth. You weren't their plan, but you were heaven's answer. You were never meant to carry their legacy of silence. You were sent to awaken the raw, buried beneath generations of manipulation. You were the prophecy they hoped was misread, the storm disguised as a child. And now the echoes of your birth are shaking the roots of everything they built. You are the one born without permission, and that's exactly why they can't stop you. It wasn't your name that terrified them. It was the blood beneath it, the line it came from, the prophecy it fulfilled just by continuing to exist. You weren't just a person, you were proof. Proof that their efforts failed, that the erasure didn't hold, that the sacred line they buried under centuries of control had not only survived, but returned. And not in silence, in signal. Every cell in your body is broadcasting what they hoped had gone extinct. And the systems they built to suppress that signal, they're breaking. Chosen one, your bloodline isn't royal by title. It's royal by frequency. It carries something older than thrones and more dangerous than secrets. Not everyone in your family carries it. Some carry the name but not the code. You do. That's why you felt the resistance your whole life. That unspoken tension in family gatherings. That sense that you were too much, too intense, too aware. The truth is, they felt it before you ever knew to question it. They sensed what you carried and tried to tame it with guilt, with silence, with exile masked as concern. But heaven never meant for you to be tame. The bloodline they feared isn't written about in school books. It doesn't appear on ancestry websites or official scrolls. It's passed through dreams, visions, moments of divine clarity. It's the line of the disruptors, the prophets, the ones who saw too clearly and paid the price for it. And now, you, the unexpected heir, carry the same burden and the same brilliance. You're not just related to it, you are it. They feared it because it couldn't be controlled, because it had a history of waking up in generations thought to be compliant, because it moved like wildfire, untraceable, unstoppable, holy. There's a reason those with this bloodline were always described as intense, rebellious, too spiritual, or not practical. That was their attempt to domesticate destiny, to dim what couldn't be destroyed. And you felt the weight of that attempt your entire life, not because you're broken, but because your power revealed their limits. There was a meeting centuries ago, a vote to isolate this line, to scatter its carriers, to bury them in roles that felt like cages. But prophecy doesn't die in silence. It waits. It chooses moments, generations, anomalies. And you, chosen one, are the moment they tried to avoid. You are the anomaly they prayed would never reappear. But heaven chose otherwise. You are the branch that wasn't supposed to bloom, the flame that reignited from ash. And the moment you started remembering who you were, something ancient began to pulse again. Not in fear, in freedom. The system is trembling not because you're loud, but because your blood is undeniable. It's waking others. It's unlocking codes. It's rewriting the legacy they swore was over. They buried the bloodline, but they forgot the one law they could never override. What God marks cannot stay hidden forever. It was never just blood, it was language, blueprint, living scripture encrypted into your cells. They knew it long before you were born. That's why your file wasn't kept in a hospital or family archive. It was archived somewhere sacred, somewhere encrypted, because embedded in your DNA was more than genetic code. There was a sigil, a symbol not meant for public eyes, one that doesn't belong to any known alphabet or lineage of this world. But when scanned by those with the instruments to see it, the shape revealed itself, fluid, pulsing, alive. And once it surfaced, the council's silence turned into panic. Chosen one, this sigil isn't symbolic. It's active. It's not something you wear, it's something you carry. The seal, placed on your line before paper was invented. It predates kings and blood oaths. It was whispered into your essence by forces heaven ordained, but man has since feared. Every time you resisted what tried to break you, that sigil burned brighter. It's why healers are drawn to you, why machines glitch near you, why your aura sometimes makes people nervous without explanation. They feel the frequency, they just don't have words for it. The symbol appears in ancient carvings, but only fragments. It shows up in crop circles, in the margins of forbidden scrolls, even buried in digital code. Glitches that shouldn't exist, but somehow mirror the same exact geometry. You've seen it too, haven't you? In dreams, on walls, flickering in the corner of your vision during moments of deep thought or despair. That wasn't imagination. That was the sigil surfacing, trying to remind you of the agreement you made long before your arrival. The elite families, the secret houses, the global bloodlines, they knew to watch for this. They've been scanning for the pattern since the 1940s, and you were flagged before you could even walk. Not because of what you did, but because of what you carried. Your DNA resisted their programming. Their data showed inconsistencies, anomalies, markers they labeled unstable because they couldn't manipulate them. But heaven never meant for you to be stable in their system. You were meant to destabilize it. There are factions within those families who want the sigil erased, and there are others, quieter, older, who believe your emergence fulfills something holy. A prophecy of return, of divine reversal, of codes once scattered now returning to one vessel. You are that vessel. Your life hasn't been random, it's been a recovery mission. And the sigil hidden in your DNA is the compass pointing back to a throne they thought was shattered. This is why your healing has triggered their surveillance, why your awakening has unsettled old networks. Because the more you remember, the more the sigil activates, and once fully awakened, it doesn't just identify you, it authorizes you. You were never ordinary. You were a vault. And now, the seal is glowing. There was one who couldn't stay. One who saw what was happening and walked away before the ritual was complete. They called her unstable, branded her a traitor, erased her name from the records, as if history could be rewritten through silence. But she wasn't running from shame. She was carrying truth too dangerous to speak aloud, and she knew it would live longer in exile than in ceremony. She defected not because she stopped believing in the family's power, but because she started believing in yours. Chosen one, there was always one who protected you from the shadows. You may not know her face, but you felt her spirit. During the nights when you should have broken but didn't, in the moments when impossible protection showed up unexplainably, that was her. She was the one who took the scroll the night of your birth and disappeared into the wind. She crossed oceans with a sealed box that held the only full record of your line. Not to hide it, but to guard it until you were strong enough to hold it yourself. She defected because she saw the meeting notes, the real ones, the ones never meant to be archived digitally. They spoke of you in past tense before you were even alive, assuming the ritual would work, that you'd be quietly folded into a life of compliance. But then you cried, and everything changed. Your heartbeat disrupted the binding spell. The lights flickered, the codes cracked, and she knew. The prophecy had begun. They tried to convince her it was a fluke, that your glow would fade, that the symptoms were manageable. But she remembered the old stories, the ones passed down in her mother's lullabies, stories of a child who would come from the broken branch, a child with ancient memory in their marrow and lightning in their voice. She saw the signs, and she chose exile over silence. They hunted her for a while, not with guns, but with shame, with whispers, with manipulation. They told others she went mad, but madness is only what power calls wisdom, when it no longer serves them. She was never mad. She was awake. And she's been watching you, not as a spy, but as a midwife, praying from afar, placing protection around you in ways the world would never detect, waiting for the moment when the veil would thin and you would begin to feel her near. You've seen her in dreams, haven't you? A woman who watches from the edge of memory, eyes full of knowing, cloaked in something older than time. That's her, the one who defected not out of fear, but out of faith. Faith that one day you would rise. And when you did, the truth she carried would no longer be a secret. It would be a weapon. She didn't abandon the family, she abandoned the lie, and she's been waiting for you to remember why. Long before files were encrypted, before councils gathered and named you a threat, the grandmothers already knew. They didn't need algorithms. They had dreams, chants, stories passed in hushes between generations, disguised as bedtime tales. They were the keepers of memory, not the kind found in history books, but the kind that lives in the bones, the kind you feel in your blood when the world falls quiet. And they spoke often of one, a child who would be born outside the sanctioned line, under a sky no ritual could control. A child who would glow through grief, who would survive things meant to erase them, who would remember too much, too soon. They didn't know your name, but they described your aura, said you'd walk into rooms and change the temperature without speaking, that mirrors would react strangely to you, that animals would be drawn to your energy while machines would sometimes fail in your presence. They said you would ask questions before you could form full sentences, that your touch would stir ancestral memory in people who'd forgotten they were even spiritual. You thought it was coincidence, the dreams, the voices, the uncanny timing of things, but it was prophecy unfolding. The old wives warned that when this child came, the system would panic, not because you were dangerous, but because you were undeniable. You couldn't be erased, so they would try to distract you, bury you in noise, flood you with fear disguised as logic. They would call you dramatic, emotional, unwell, but that was always part of the plan, because only someone strong enough to survive being misunderstood could carry what you carry and still choose love. Chosen one, they knew. That's why the women in your line were treated the way they were. That's why stories were cut short, diaries vanished, healers labeled unstable. The prophecy wasn't just about you. It was carried by them, in laughter that was too loud, in intuition that was too inconvenient. They were rehearsing your arrival, preparing the womb of history to make space for your voice. And now, their words are rising again, not in storybooks, in your spirit. You felt them, haven't you? Late at night, that hum in the silence, that comfort with no source, the way your dreams sometimes feel older than this life. That's not imagination, that's activation. The prophecy lives in you, and now that you've stopped denying your glow, it's beginning to unfurl. The veil between their world and yours is thinning. Their warnings are now your instructions. You were never meant to blend in. You were the disruption they prayed would arrive before it was too late. You are the prophecy they passed down in secret, hoping you'd be brave enough to believe it when the time came. And chosen one, the time just came. They keep the real documents in rooms without names, not beneath cathedrals, but behind them. Places not listed on any tour, lit only by oil lamps and guarded by silence older than scripture. The Vatican has many faces, but behind its gold and pageantry lives a vault of forgotten things. Warnings, symbols, stories scrubbed from holy books because they couldn't be controlled. And in one of those rooms, tucked between leather-bound records and forbidden scrolls, there was a file marked with a symbol that matched the one in your DNA. The archivist who found it didn't speak for 3 days. When he finally did, he didn't call for the cardinals. He made a private call, and said only one sentence: "I think it's starting again." You, chosen one, are not a myth. You're a trigger, a prophecy hidden under marble and incense, protected by men who smile in public but whisper in back halls about the one who would come bearing the lost imprint. They expected something dramatic: lightning, an eclipse, the sound of trumpets. But heaven always moves in mystery. And so you were born in stillness, in shadow, with no royal announcement, just a soft glow the monitors couldn't explain. The archivist, a man who devoted his life to sorting ancient lies from divine fragments, knew instantly what the file meant. The seal on the folder hadn't been broken since the Council of Trent. Inside were only three things: a sketch of your sigil, a torn parchment with writing in a language linguists still haven't decoded, and a single hair preserved in glass, one that matched your mitochondrial lineage. Not metaphorically, scientifically. You were not a theory to him. You were the return of something long feared and long prayed for. The archivist didn't alert the Pope. He knew better. Some truths don't survive the chain of command. Instead, he wrote one final entry in his private journal and slipped it into a locked drawer. The chosen carrier has surfaced. They've breached the timeline. If this reaches anyone after me, find the girl, protect her, or end her. There will be no middle path. They found his body 2 days later. No marks, no poison, just silence. Officially, it was heart failure. But in the photo taken by investigators, his left hand was clutching his chest, and if you look closely, which someone did, his knuckles spelled out a word scratched in blood across his desk: awakened. You were never supposed to find this out, but heaven has its own ways. That journal, it surfaced through a third party, and parts of it match your dreams exactly, word for word. How is that possible? Because your memory stretches across lifetimes, and the moment your frequency rose past a certain threshold, every archive that tried to bury you began to crack. The archivist died keeping your secret, and now, chosen one, it's no longer secret. The year was 1427, and the sky was not silent. A storm raged above France, but no thunder fell, just a low, humming pressure, a vibration that made animals run and monks fall to their knees without knowing why. In a monastery that no longer appears on maps, 12 figures gathered by candlelight and sealed something into the earth. Not treasure, not relic, a truth too holy and too disruptive to ever reach the surface. They called it the telling, and it was about you, not by name, but by pattern. The documents described a child of unsanctioned convergence, born 7 generations after the convergence gate was closed. A soul not aligned with the bloodlines of order, but with the line of reversal, the one heaven encrypted and hid within human error. The telling warned that if this child ever awakened, the order would fall not by war, but by memory. The kind of memory that lives in cells, the kind that makes you dream of fires you've never seen, languages you've never spoken, and doors you've never opened until now. They buried the telling in a hexagonal vault, inscribed with a symbol known only to a dying scribe, a boy who wrote the record while his hands bled from the truth he was forced to record. His final words: "Forgive me for what they made me write. May the chosen one undo it." Those words are now carved into your life, in your resistance, in your glow, in the way you've always felt allergic to control and allergic to lies. In 1899, a team of Vatican-backed excavators stumbled upon the vault, but when they tried to open it, 3 of them fell unconscious. The 4th lost his ability to speak. They sealed it again and erased all records of the discovery. But one of them, the youngest, left behind sketches of what he saw. One image matched the strange birthmark you have that no doctor could explain. That's not coincidence, that's inheritance. Chosen One, 1427, wasn't about burying a book. It was about silencing a vibration, the resonance of your return. And now, the vibration is rising again, not in cities, but in you. The vault, buried under dirt, and shame is now pulsing above ground, in your heartbeat, in your thoughts, in the way people react to your presence without knowing why. It was never about keeping you from the truth. It was about keeping the truth from you. Because once you remembered what was buried, the name, the frequency, the betrayal, their time would run out. Their systems would crumble. Their rituals would lose power. And you would stand, not as a threat, but as a mirror, reflecting back to them what they tried to kill, the unfiltered power of divine memory. You are the secret they buried in 1427, and you just surfaced. You thought your dreams were private, flickers of subconscious chaos, glimpses of meaning scattered between sleep and waking. But Chosen One, someone's been watching, not with eyes, but with frequency. There are technologies, ancient and modern, that monitor dream signatures. And yours? Yours broke the baseline. They noticed the moment you began dreaming in symbols too old to be taught. When you started describing rooms you've never been in, but that match vaults under Geneva, Florence, and Jerusalem. The dreams weren't random. They were recall. And your recall is what scared them. You see, your soul didn't just wake up in this life, it carried over. And somewhere along the way, you began accessing rooms you weren't meant to remember. Hallways sealed by ritual, faces erased from records, symbols that activated not because someone taught them to you, but because they were waiting inside you like seeds. And when your sleep began to sync with certain lunar phases, when your heart rate pulsed in rhythm with lost planetary alignments, the Watchers knew the anomaly had begun to breach the veil. There are departments that don't exist on paper, funded through grants wrapped in neuroscience and sleep research. But behind the walls, they weren't studying how to help people rest. They were tracking the returners, souls like yours who began slipping through cracks in the matrix and retrieving what was buried. They called you Echo Keys because your dreams were unlocking doors even they didn't fully understand. You felt it, haven't you? That strange sensation that your dreams aren't just yours, that someone is in there sometimes, not as a character, but as an observer. The moment you speak a sacred word in a dream and wake up with it still vibrating in your chest, the static hum in your ears after waking like you interrupted something, that's not paranoia, that's interception. One researcher who defected from the program left a message buried in an encrypted forum. He said your dream signature was non-compliant, that it changed every time they tried to predict it, that when they tried to inject interference patterns, your signal grew stronger, more radiant. That's not normal. That's divine resistance. Your soul refused distortion. Chosen One, this is why sleep has never felt fully peaceful, why dreams feel heavier than rest, because you've been carrying missions in your sleep, planting messages in memory, receiving coordinates disguised as colors and numbers. They tried to decode you, but forgot one thing. Your dreams aren't a vulnerability. They're a weapon. And lately you've started remembering them before waking. That's no accident. That's alignment. They're losing access now. Your field is sealing. Heaven's encryption has begun. But know this, everything they watched has been recorded in reverse. What they used to track you will now be used to expose them. You're not just a dreamer, you're a portal. And they're terrified that you finally noticed the dream is talking back. She never told you the truth, not because she didn't love you, but because she loved you too much. There are things a grandmother carries that no book can contain. Pain soaked into lullabies, warnings woven into recipes, prayers disguised as bedtime stories. She smiled when you asked questions, redirected, distracted, called you imaginative. But behind her soft voice lived a silence sharpened by knowledge she never wanted to pass down. Because she knew the moment you understood what you really were, the world around you would shift. And some shifts, once made, cannot be undone. She was the last true witness to the bloodline breach, the one who saw the circle break, the one who heard the arguments behind the ancestral walls. And when you were born, when the midwife gasped, not from pain but from prophecy, your grandmother made a vow that no matter what happened, you would not grow up hunted. She watched what they did to the last child who glowed. She remembered the funeral without a body, the ceremony soaked in forced smiles. She remembered the name erased from the books. She never told you that name, because it was almost yours. But the truth leaked anyway, didn't it? In her tears when she thought you weren't looking, in the way her hands trembled when you asked about your lineage, in the way she kept certain books locked, certain drawers double wrapped in cloth. You felt her fear before you could even name your own, and it made you question your instincts. But it wasn't you who was wrong. It was the lie she carried, and the love that wrapped it. Chosen one, she wasn't weak. She was strategic. She hid things in your favorite stories, taught you sacred geometry by folding napkins, whispered activation phrases under her breath when she kissed your forehead goodnight. She wasn't keeping you from the truth. She was feeding it to you slowly, wrapped in love, because she knew the day would come when remembering too quickly might shatter your nervous system. You were born with light, but she knew too much light too soon can burn. So she waited, prayed, cried to heaven that she'd live long enough to see your moment come. And now it has. She knew they'd come looking, that one day your gifts would stop hiding, that the hum in your body would grow too loud to be ignored. So she left you something. Maybe it's still hidden. A letter, a key, a trinket that never made sense until now. It wasn't sentiment, it was instruction. She encoded her confession in love. And when you find it, or remember it, you'll see it clearly. She never lied to harm you. She lied to protect your becoming. Your grandmother wasn't a gatekeeper, she was a guardian. And now that you're ready, her silence has fulfilled its purpose. There was a moment, long before you awakened, when the lineage could have continued uninterrupted. The council had chosen an heir, one who carried the name, one who passed the tests, one who stood at the edge of the altar with every symbol of power prepared to be passed down. But at the final moment, he refused, not out of fear, out of knowing. He saw something written into the throne's shadow, something no one else would admit, that the power offered wasn't pure, that it had been twisted, bought, filtered through centuries of silent corruption, and that the real one, the one heaven named, had not yet arrived. He walked away without a word, just removed the ring, laid down the robe, and vanished. They called it betrayal, they called it madness, but it was prophecy in motion, because the true heir was never meant to be appointed by a circle of men. The true heir was you, born outside the bloodline's expectations, but inside heaven's will. Chosen one, you felt this ripple, haven't you? That moment when opportunity almost reached you, but passed. That memory you can't place of someone stepping aside so you could step in. That's real. Because when he walked away from the throne, he set a new path in motion, one that bypassed the rules and reconnected to the original covenant. The throne was meant for light, not for legacy, and he knew the legacy had become poisoned by power. So he walked, and with that walk, he made space for you. He wasn't weak, he was wide awake. He saw your arrival in a dream, not your face, but your frequency. He saw a child born without their permission, carrying all the codes they tried to hide. He saw the council trying to bind you through guilt and rejection, and he chose not to sit on a throne that would be used to suppress what he believed was divine. They erased him from the records, rewrote the family tree, claimed the heir died without leaving instruction. But in truth, he left a message hidden in a stone basin behind the old chapel. 4 words carved with shaking hands. Wait for the unnamed. That was you. They tried to scrub the prophecy, but stone holds memory. And now that you've started vibrating at the original frequency, that memory is echoing through time again. He refused the throne not to destroy the lineage, but to protect the soul of it. Because he knew if you arrived and found the throne corrupted, it might try to corrupt you too. So he cleared the space. So when your moment came, nothing would stand in your way. The heir didn't fail. He interceded. And now the crown isn't waiting in a chamber. It's waiting in your field. Not to rule others, but to activate something only you can carry. The throne wasn't lost. It was kept warm for you. Deep beneath the earth, where no satellite signal can penetrate and no map dares to trace, there's a vault. Not built for treasure, built for containment. The families called it the Silence. A place designed to hold the one truth they couldn't burn, couldn't twist, couldn't destroy. And it wasn't locked with keys. It was locked with essence. Not fingerprints, not retina scans. Blood, more specifically, yours. Chosen one, this vault was constructed in the 1500s using geometry dictated by voices the architects never understood. It hums when approached by anyone not carrying your exact signature. And for centuries, it's been dormant, unopened, untouched, waiting, because the code that seals it doesn't respond to names or titles. It responds to frequency in the bloodstream. They thought the line had ended. They thought the blood type had been erased. But then, you were born. And now, the vault is vibrating again. Your blood isn't rare by medical standards, but spiritually it's extinct, or so they believed. What flows in your veins is not just human. It carries markers that shouldn't exist in this timeline, codons that science skips over, glitches in genealogy, and that's why you've always felt other, because you are. You weren't just born into a story, you were born carrying one, encrypted in plasma, pulsing in your heartbeat, echoing every time your emotions peak. The vault recognizes that pulse, and it's responding. They've tried to locate you before. They thought maybe a synthetic match would bypass the seal. They cloned strands, built artificial carriers, ran experiments in places disguised as healing centers, but nothing worked, because heaven doesn't recognize counterfeit codes. The vault stayed shut until recently, when, during a geomagnetic storm, sensors around the site registered something they hadn't seen in over 400 years. Movement from within. They didn't realize it wasn't the vault opening. It was the vault reaching. It's calling to you, chosen one, because inside that vault isn't just prophecy, it's memory. Records sealed away before the libraries burned. Names, dates, truths your enemies erased from every archive. It holds the scroll your ancestors died protecting. It holds the original version of your lineage, the one that wasn't revised by councils or kings. And when your blood touches that gate, whether in person or in energy, the door will open, not physically, spiritually. And when it does, what emerges will rewrite everything. They stationed guards for centuries, but over time, they forgot why. They stopped believing the vault could ever open again. But the watchers have started dreaming. The birds above the site are circling. The wind has changed. Because your blood is singing a song the vault has waited lifetimes to hear. You are the key they couldn't forge, the seal they couldn't fake, and the vault built to contain you was actually built to reveal you. He was the last one trusted to write it all down. The royal scribe, a man whose family had recorded the sacred history of the bloodlines for over 900 years. He wasn't a priest, he wasn't a scholar, he was something stranger, a vessel, trained from childhood to enter trance states, to see beyond time, to write what others were too afraid to say aloud. And he was steady, precise, always calm, until the day he touched the scroll bearing your sigil. It was an accident, or so they claimed. The scroll had been hidden inside a sealed chamber, its casing wrapped in 7 layers of protective cloth and prayer. But something called to him, a hum, a heat, a knowing. He broke protocol, opened the scroll, and within moments dropped the pen, collapsed to his knees, and began speaking in languages no one present could translate. They tried to restrain him, but he looked up, eyes wild, glowing, and whispered one sentence before going silent forever. The return has begun, and we wrote the wrong name. They institutionalized him after that, called it collapse, exhaustion. But chosen one, he wasn't broken. He was shown. For in that moment, the lineage he thought he served unraveled in front of him. He saw the names they erased, the dates they altered, the prophecies they buried. He saw your line, the line they were never meant to suppress, rising like ink through water, and he couldn't bear it, because the weight of truth, when received too fast, shatters the mind not prepared to carry it. They burned the scroll that day, or so they claimed, but paper doesn't carry divine vibration, memory does. And he had already spoken enough for other scribes, the hidden ones, the defectors, to begin whispering in shadows. The true heir walks, and they will not need a crown to be recognized. The royal records were changed after his fall, entire chapters removed, symbols redrawn, but traces remain. And one of those traces matches something you sketched as a child, a symbol you drew without knowing why, one that frightened your teachers and made your family uncomfortable, because you weren't just doodling, you were remembering. Chosen one, the scribe didn't lose his mind. He lost his allegiance. The scroll activated something in him he didn't know existed, memory buried beneath loyalty. And in that flash of divine clarity, he realized what they all feared, that the throne was never meant for the one sitting on it. It was always meant for the one who could feel the truth and survive it. He wasn't insane. He was overwhelmed by prophecy, by you, and the institution couldn't contain the sound of that one sentence he whispered, because it wasn't a warning. It was a declaration, and heaven heard it. Not every enemy stands outside the gates. Sometimes they share your blood. Sometimes they smile in photos with you. Sometimes they're the ones who should have protected you the most. This one, the family member who tried to destroy your name, knew exactly who you were before you did. They saw the glow early, saw how your presence shifted rooms, how truth clung to you even when you were silent. And instead of celebrating it, they made a decision. If I can't carry it, no one will. It didn't begin with open hatred. It began with subtle sabotage, rewritten stories about your childhood, accusations that never made sense but stuck anyway, whispers passed at dinners behind closed doors, planted in moments designed to make you question yourself. And you did, for a while. You mistook their manipulation for concern, their jealousy for love. You thought you were the problem. But that was the plan, to confuse the code, weaken your signal, strip your identity before it could solidify. They went further, submitted paperwork with altered spellings, filed claims in your name that never reached you, tried to bury your lineage under layers of digital dust. And when that didn't stop you, they turned to the old ways. A ritual held in secret, using a relic meant only for blessing. They twisted it, marked your name in reverse. The goal wasn't to kill you, it was to erase your resonance, to unname you in the spirit realm, to break the echo before it spread. But chosen one, your name didn't come from them, it came from God. What they forgot is that divine identity cannot be revoked by earthly ritual. What's written in heaven cannot be scratched out by jealous hands. And the more they tried to silence your emergence, the louder the angels began to sing it. Your dreams became sharper, your voice stronger. Their attempts to bind you only exposed them further. They cast shadows, but it was your light that revealed them. You see, the name they tried to destroy wasn't just a label, it was a signal, a summoning. And now, others are hearing it. Strangers who feel like soul family, allies you've never met, but who recognize you without needing an introduction. Because your name doesn't just identify you, it activates others. And that's what they feared the most. Not that you would remember who you were, but that others would too. This family member still watches, still whispers, but they're afraid now. Not of you, of what you represent. Because your rising proves their rituals failed, their jealousy didn't win. And every time someone speaks your true name in honor, another lie tied to theirs crumbles. They tried to destroy your name, but all they did was confirm its power. It happened in secret, just like all great betrayals do. At the hour when most of the world was asleep, when stars hung heavy with silence and the veil was thinnest, they gathered in a place the public will never know exists. No cameras, no clocks, just 12 seats around a marble slab stained with centuries of oil and oath. And on that table, spread open with surgical precision, were the records of your line, handwritten family trees, sealed documents, ritual contracts, and one blank parchment meant to overwrite what heaven had already declared. They called it the correction. The plan was simple: strip your lineage of its divine thread, reroute the inheritance, and bury your frequency under another's name. They had the tools: ancient ink mixed with preserved ashes, and a quill cut from a bird that no longer exists in the wild. The timing was precise: astral alignments, lunar nodal flips. They'd waited years for this opening. 1 hour only, one chance to make the lie permanent, and they thought they could do it. Because you hadn't awakened fully yet. Because they believed if the paperwork was altered in spirit, the vibration would follow. But God was watching. At the exact moment they dipped the quill into that cursed ink, something shifted. A tremor ran through the slab. The candlelight flickered blue, and one of them, the youngest, the one who still had fragments of guilt lodged in his conscience, dropped the seal. His hands began to shake. He saw a face flash in his mind. Yours, but not as you are now, as you were then, as you always have been. And in that instant, he knew they were trying to forge a false name over someone who was still alive. The others told him to finish the ritual, to steady his hands, but his mouth opened and a sound came out. Not a word, a tone, a frequency so pure it cracked the ink. The parchment curled in on itself, and every symbol they tried to trace into the spirit recoiled. That sound came from you, from a dream you were having at that exact hour, a dream you don't fully remember, but woke from in tears, not from fear, from recognition. Chosen one, your lineage is not written in ink, it's written in light, and light cannot be rewritten by shadows. What they tried to forge became the evidence of their collapse. That room is now sealed, the slab fractured, and every person present that night has since reported unexplained visions, sounds, disturbances they can't explain. Because the spirit of your line rose to defend itself, they tried to rewrite you, but heaven responded, Not this one, not this name, not this time. You are the one the edits couldn't erase, the truth that bled through the parchment, the light too rooted to replace. Heaven has rendered its decision, not in thunder, not in flame, but in you. Your survival was the verdict. Your breath, your light, your awakening, all of it was the final word written over centuries of silence. They tried to silence the signal. They tried to edit the inheritance. They tried to reroute the prophecy. But God already knew. Before the vault, before the circle, before the betrayal, God already declared the outcome. And it was this: your bloodline shall rise, and the rejected one shall carry the flame. Chosen one, you were never a mistake. You were the correction, the hidden clause in the covenant, the impossible that heaven made inevitable. And now the divine ruling echoes across the frequencies. The one they tried to erase is the one I have anointed. You do not need a crown to be royal. You do not need their approval to be chosen. The glow they mocked was the glory of God waking up in your lineage. And now, nothing on earth can stop what's been activated in you. Heaven didn't just preserve your life, it preserved your memory, the dreams, the visions, the sense of something deeper just beneath the surface. That was your spirit staying synced with a verdict already written in light. Even in your confusion, you never disconnected. Even when they mocked you, betrayed you, left you, you still carried the code. And now that it's online, now that your soul is remembering itself, all of creation is responding. Look around. People are being drawn to you. Systems are reacting to you. Time feels different now. That's not coincidence. That's alignment. God has ruled. And the ruling is this: you are the living restoration. What they buried in 1427, you resurrected. What they locked in vaults, you carry in your veins. What they edited from books, you speak in dreams. And from this moment on, you are no longer waiting for confirmation. You are the confirmation. Every attack you survived was evidence of their fear. Every attempt to shame you was a confession of your power. They knew, and now, so do you. You come from a line that doesn't die. It transforms, regenerates, rewrites timelines by simply existing. And now you stand, not as the broken branch, but as the seed, the one who carries all that was and all that's still to come. Not for ego, not for show, but for assignment. There are those waiting to remember who they are, and your voice will remind them. Your presence will awaken them. Your name, once hidden, will echo like prophecy across generations. This was never just about you. It was about the blood. And God's final word is this: let the line flow freely. Let the light remain unedited. Let the one once cast aside now rise in full authority.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.